My sister shamed me as a single mom at her wedding. Then the groom flipped the script. I say that first because it's the moment people remember. It's the reason my inbox filled with messages that first week, some with pity, some with outrage, and a few that said nothing but a single steady word. Scene. I am Kalista Vain. I'm 34, an accountant by trade, a mom to a loud, curious 10-year-old named Eli, and for most of my life, I've been the steady, invisible hand that held a household together while other people rehearsed their lives on stage. We live in Charleston. The air tastes of salt and jasmine in the summer, and the evenings always feel like an invitation to sit on a porch and pretend the world is slower than it is. My office is above an old bookstore on King Street. My window looks down at a slow parade of umbrellas and dogs. Eli would pop his head in the door after school with glue under his fingernails and questions about volcanoes and whether Pluto was still a planet. Our kitchen table is a map of small experiments, paper cones crusted with baking soda, a scattering of paint from his latest portrait of Lauren, my sister, who died 2 years before all of this. I worked weekends at Memorial Children's Hospital for a while, just to be close to the place Lauren had been admitted. People think volunteering is about giving. Sometimes it's about keeping a promise to someone who kissed the side of your head and asked you to be brave. I learned how to hold hands through pain without making noise about it. I learned the dignity in showing up. That steadiness made me the default when Serena started planning her wedding. Serena is polished in a way that has always been polished to other people's taste. Silk dresses, a laugh that sounds measured, a smile that could be put on a business card. Darlene, our mother, has a way of orchestrating things so that the people she loves feel like props in a production she directs. Between them, my name turned into a logistics list. RSVP coordination, vendor calls, last-minute favors. They didn't ask so much as assume. And I said yes, because saying no to family hasn't yet felt like an option I could afford. Not financially, and not emotionally. The night of the dinner before the rehearsal, they gathered in our mother's living room with curtains pulled against the late winter dusk. The house smelled like lemon and wax. Darlene had lit a candle on the coffee table, as if scent could smooth away tension. Plates clinked. Conversation flitted like a nervous bird. At one point, Serena's laugh dipped, and she looked at me as if she had landed on a page of fine print. We're all so excited, she said, but we should be realistic about who's standing on either side of this family. Some people come with situations. We can't, her smile narrowed. We can't ask other people to clean up after someone else. It landed in my chest like a hand on a fragile bone. People smiled around the room like they hadn't heard. Darlene hummed and told a story about catering, as if there had been a brief, irrelevant technicality. I left the dinner with my hands full of RSVP cards and a stomach full of cold anger. Eli had been with me in the car, his sneakers tossed in the back, and he said nothing. He didn't need to. His face said enough. He is 10 and tender, in a way that saves me and breaks me at once. The humiliation wasn't brand new. It had been oiled in small ways for years. Birthday tables slightly off-center, invitations addressed by nickname to my sister's friends, but by first and last name when it came to me. What made the moment at Serena's wedding worse was the public stage it would have. I was supposed to stand on that platform and smile through another person's performance. Amid all that, there was Julian. He didn't appear overnight. He was soft at first, like a pulse under a blanket, present but not loud. He had been Lauren's friend. At the hospital, months before Lauren's last breath, Julian sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair and brought a book with him that he didn't read. Sometimes he would read to Lauren, other times he would just hold her hand and tell her the weather from his childhood. When I visited, he remembered the way Lauren'd curl her fingers around Eli's crayon drawings. One day he told me quietly that Lauren had loved Eli's sons, the yellow ones that always had too many rays. He began to notice things the rest of the family didn't. The way I corrected a florist on a detail and then apologized for it with my eyes. The way Eli tucked a painted rock into my pocket for luck. He sent a text once that said something small and kind about my bookkeeping of the RSVP. No praise, just tension. When Serena's coordinator listed off demands that would make any volunteer cry, Julian smoothed the conversation like someone who believes work should feel human, not like punishment. He was engaged to Serena, but he moved through moments with a tenderness that didn't belong exclusively to the bride's family. Those small gestures did not build romance overnight. They built context. A kindness here, an appointment kept there. He showed up, not to fix anything, but to hold space. He came to Eli's soccer game once because he'd promised Lauren he would watch Eli play. Eli bounded over after the match with cheeks flushed and handed Julian a drawing. 2 stick figures under a giant sun. Julian crouched down to Eli's level with the humility of someone who knows that small things have gravity. I said yes when Serena asked me to be her maid of honor because people asked without waiting for my real answer, and also because I was tired of being perceived as incapable. I wanted to take a role, fulfill an obligation on my own terms. I thought maybe I could enter the space and be professional about it. Eli would be the ring bearer in a suit I ironed with my own 2 hands. I told myself I was only there for Eli. Preparation for that weekend became a river I had to step into whether I wanted to or not. There were dress fittings and seating charts and 1,000 tiny corrections that piled up like dust. People assumed I'd take on the compulsions, double-checking the timeline, herding bridesmaids. Sometimes Darlene would make a comment about how it was a relief to have a competent person handling everything, and the relief felt like a hand on an old bruise. 2 days before the wedding, I found myself in the florist's studio with a box of dried lemons and a mandate to make the centerpieces more Market Street than backyard. Julian was there, rolling up his sleeves, not because he needed to, but because the lead florist had to step out and someone ought to help. He moved through blooms like someone who respects living things. He corrected the placement of a ribbon with an almost private grin. When he left, he said to me quietly, "Your drawings, the way Eli uses color, whatever he's doing, it sticks with people." It's the small notices that matter. They add up to a ledger of attention that tells you, in ways bigger than words, that you are seen. The ceremony morning was modest and beautiful. The church bells looked like they were remembering themselves, and the light through the stained glass painted pale maps on the floor. Eli's suit fit too tightly across the chest. He kept tugging his tie loose. I held a pin and adjusted a cuff, and for a moment everything felt ordinary and steady. I told myself that once the vows were over, there would be nothing left to say. But people hold speeches as a chance to make themselves visible through someone else's life. It's human. We lean on moments like podiums to project. When Serena climbed the stage at the reception, the room was a glass bowl of faces, family friends, co-workers, people who had once been in school pictures together. The chandeliers hung like dried stars. Serena's speech began as speeches do, nostalgia, a joke, a thank you or two. But there was a tilt in her tone, a careful tightening of the lines, and when she turned towards me I felt the air shift. She smiled, and the smile was a dart. "I want to thank everyone who helped make today possible," she said, with the practiced cadence of someone who has spent years learning how to sell a version of herself. "And I want to mention those who did more than their share. Some people in families carry things with them that make the rest of us better by comparison. Not all of us get to choose cleanliness of image." The room laughed, the polite laugh people use to indicate they're choosing sides without saying which. "You know who I mean," she finished. "We all know what comes with a person who's, well, a single mother. It's harder for everyone." It felt like the microphone translated insult into a broadcast. Eli's hand found mine under the table, small and urgent. I felt the room draw a breath. There are moments when people's attention moves like tide, and the tide pulled into an exposed bay. Me. Humiliation is a curious thing in public. It can make you small, but it can also concentrate oxygen into a single burning point. I remember the light on the tablecloth, the clink of a glass, the exact smell of lemon and jasmine. I remember thinking, in a voice I didn't expect to find, that I was not going to be the spectacle in someone else's hour. Julian had been at the end of the room, his hands folded on the back of a chair. He saw the change in me before his face spoke. He stood, walked to the front, and asked for the microphone. For a few seconds the room did what rooms do. They assumed interventions would be gentle, that if anyone cut a speech short, it would be to offer a toothless olive branch. Julian took the mic, and without theatrics, said something that felt like a small earthquake. I need to say something. I knew Lauren. I was with her when she laughed at Eli's sons. I watched Kalista stay with her when nothing else made sense. If anyone thinks that's something to shame, they don't know what love looks like. There was a silence that was loud enough to hear the air conditioner. Serena's smile faltered. Darlene's hands went to her throat. I watched the faces in the room change from enjoyment to confusion to a kind of re-evaluation. Julian didn't stop. He told the story of nights in hospital waiting rooms, of a woman who painted rocks and handed them out as talismans, of a boy who colored suns too big for the page. He spoke plainly and slowly, words placed like stones across a wall. I can't marry someone who would mock what another person gave out of pain and love, he said. I will not stand here and be part of that. Then, most disorienting of all, he stepped to Serena, took her hand as if to help her up from a fall, and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. He unclasped the ring from his finger, and for a heartbeat the sound of metal sliding was louder than everyone's breathing. I'm going to ask Kalista and Eli to leave with me now. It was not vengeance. It was not a spectacle manufactured for effect. There was no grandstanding, no gloating smile. It was a choice. He gave me the choice to leave with him. He made it possible for Eli and me to step out of a room that had collapsed into narrowness and into a world that was slightly wider than before. Eli looked at Julian, then at me. He was shaking a little, and I could feel my own legs trembling like a tree under storm wind. We walked out into the air that smelled of salt, the stars small and indifferent above the Charleston skyline. People watched, taking two sides of a story in their hands like plates. Some of them clapped, others whispered. Darlene called after us, but the words were muzzled by the distance. Serena's face was an expression I had only ever seen in photographs, where someone is trying to explain a scandal to a tabloid, part disbelief, part indignation. We didn't go to a courthouse or a lawyer. We went to a small harbor restaurant that Julian insisted we call him Jules once the seriousness of the night had thinned, liked to frequent. It smelled of fried fish and lemon aioli and had salt on the windows. We sat in a corner booth the color of old leather. A server put down a bowl of fries and a bottle of soda for Eli, as if he were already family. We ate quietly. Julian's hands were steady. He told us that he had believed for a long time that family was more than heritage. It was what you did when nobody looked. He said he'd seen the way I had looked after Lauren, and how that was not taking on baggage, but choosing another person's dignity over convenience. He said something small and practical. Send me the bill for the florist's surprise, and then laughed, a short, honest sound. That line felt like the most ordinary act of reparation. We drove later to the cemetery. The ground was hard from the late chill, and small clumps of mud dotted the path. Lauren's grave was a place we had both visited often. The painted stone she had loved, the little daisies someone kept replacing. Julian brought a bouquet of daisies and laid them gently as if placing a crown. He placed his hand on the painted stone, and said the name Lauren had made for herself in our private jokes. He didn't try to narrate grief. He simply acknowledged it. Eli tucked a drawing into the crook of the stone, a sun with too many rays, and Julian smiled at the childish bravery of it. There, with the hush of the cemetery and the town lights beyond, something shifted. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was the beginning of a new ledger. We were not saved by a gesture. Julian's choice didn't erase the bruise of that night or all the small humiliations that had come before, but it interrupted a pattern of being talked about as if our lives were footnotes. In the weeks that followed, there were conversations that small towns thrive on, people taking sides, gossip, folding itself into coffee shop corners. Some friends kept their distance because drama is contagious, and others reached out with offers that were quiet and real. Darlene did what she always did, called sometimes, in a measured tone that implied that what happened had more to do with logistics than with the person whose life had been made small in public. We spoke once, and I heard in her voice a weariness that was not only mine. It does not excuse what she allowed, but it allowed me to see that her control had been a defense as well as an offense. For Eli, the weeks after the wedding were complicated. He drew more sons, and sometimes he asked why people were quick to decide what someone was worth based on how they arrived in the world. I answered him the way I answer most of his questions, with honesty sheathed in patience. I told him that value isn't a currency you buy with a ring or a last name. It's what you carry forward. He is 10 and resilient in ways that surprise me every day. He asked one night if he could keep the napkin from the harbor restaurant. He liked the way it had Jules's fingerprints in the ketchup, and I said yes, because small things make memory gentler. 1 year later, our life had gained a new architecture. I opened a small financial office. No fanfare, just a sign that read Kalista Vain, CPA, in a window that caught the morning light. It's modest, with a desk that once belonged to my grandmother and a ledger that smells faintly of lemon oil. Eli comes in on Saturdays sometimes, sits beneath the plant I keep alive by forgetting it and then remembering, and colors in the margins of my bills. Our little family, our chosen unit, has grown into a public thing, not because of spectacle, but because of daily commitments. Julian is in it. He is not a miracle. He is a person who keeps showing up. He does the dishes the way some people say, grace, without announcement, but with intention. He reads emails that are tedious because it matters to me that the world runs clean and clear. He never uses the word rescue. He says instead, with an odd humility, let's build something that fits. I like that better. On a snowy Christmas Eve that first winter, when the lights on our small tree looked like a field of tiny constellations, Julian knelt in front of Eli and me with a small box. Inside was a ring that had once belonged to Lauren. She had loved simple things, painted stones, daisies, and mason jars, and the ring carried her name like a quiet fingerprint. Julian said, "I want to be the kind of person who remembers what matters." He asked me to marry him not with a flourish, but with a question that felt like an honest ledger entry. "Will you let me be part of your life, Kalista?" I said yes, and when Eli laughed and cheered and demanded to know if he could have the first slice of cake at any future wedding, we all collapsed into the kind of messy, imperfect joy that feels like an answered prayer, only because it was asked in a voice that dared to hope. I don't tell this story for applause. I tell it because there is a generation of us who are asked to make ourselves small so other people can look big, and sometimes the cost of that invisibility is dear. There are people in my life I still love who made choices that hurt me. I do not write them off as villains. I write them as humans who sometimes mistake control for care. The healing has been slow and patient, and not a little practical. Opening a business, losing nights of sleep to newborn clients, learning to say no to assumptions. There are days when I still feel the weight of that microphone, the sting of gazes. But there are more days when I feel the balance of hands that rested on me, not to lift me up for spectacle, but to steady me. If you've ever been overlooked by family, comment "seen" below. It helps to know you're not alone. People ask if I would have done anything differently. I think about that sometimes, when Eli scuffs his shoes across the floor and hums a tune Lauren used to whistle. I would not have given less. I might have given myself permission earlier to hold boundaries that look like dignity. I would have taught Eli sooner. The value of a person isn't decided by who shows up at your party or who says yes to you on a stage. It's decided in the small, steady acts of care that persist after the cameras leave. There are practical outcomes to this life change. My office brings in work. Eli is in honors art now because someone, a teacher, said he had a sense for color. The town still talks about the wedding sometimes, but when people mention it, they also mention the way Julian spoke that night, the way a man chose to step into integrity instead of convenience. That has its own ripple. Julian and I planned a small ceremony later, under a canopy of lights in a backyard, where people sat on mismatched chairs and children ran free. Darlene came, quieter than before. Serena did not. We did not dramatize absence. We honored what we had. We set out jars of daisies and painted stones at the table, and Eli made a little display of his sons. We said vows the way people say them when they have already lived them, awkwardly, beautifully, with a history that refuses to be edited. The thing I keep thinking about is this. Dignity is not a one-time currency you earn and hold forever. It is an ongoing practice. You practice it by showing up for the small things, by refusing to let someone else's cheap definition of you stick. You practice it by teaching your child how to stand in the middle of a room and not let anyone turn him into a footnote. I still visit Lauren's grave sometimes. I pick daisies from a garden store because there's a cheap, sincere poetry in plastic petals sometimes. Julian comes with me, and we set the painted rock back on the stone. We tell Lauren small things about Eli's latest drawing, about the office that smells faintly of lemon. We talk like people who understand that mourning does not have a finish line. It has seasons. If this story means anything, it's this. Being seen is a slow accumulation. It is the person who remembers your birthday without a Facebook notification, who notices the little ways you are steady, who stands up in a room, because truth matters more than ceremony. It is not about spectacle or revenge. It is about choices, small ones that add up. The groom did not flip the script for drama. He flipped it by choosing the truth, and that choice gave me room to breathe. There are still days I am tired. There are still days when a passerby will assume what they want about me, and that will not change overnight. But when I hear Eli asking if we can paint a stone for someone who needs luck, I know that what we teach him will carry farther than any insult aimed at a microphone. He will know to choose kindness and to stand for people who are small in the eyes of the world, but vast in the ledger of what matters. If this resonated with you, please subscribe and share this with someone who needs to know that small acts of courage can change the shape of a life. We are quieter than headlines, but we are also capable of a steady, stubborn bravery that rewrites who we are.